if I've got to get from here to Chicago, there's no point me starting that journey unless I know where I'm at.
Exactly.
I don't know which way to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the wrong way for sure.
Exactly.
So I have to know exactly what I've got today, what it looks like, the good and the bad, and then what do I need to do to get to where I want to end up.
Everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider, hanging out today with a very special guest all the way from Sydney, Australia. I think it was about a 32-hour trip after multiple delays. Is a gentleman that I would say is a friend, a mentor, and has been a close advisor to me and my dad, Chris, really since the beginning. And I was saying to Craig right before the show, it's kind of... we've come full circle, Craig, because when I was just a young man, the first time I met Craig, he came over from Australia to be a part of the first ever EPI International Conference, which was like a whole 60 people big. And Craig and I guess, took a liking to each other. So Craig invited me out with a couple of the other folks from Australia and a couple of other folks that I think were just associated or you knew from the SEPA community. And you got to recall for our listeners who's kind of followed the show here, this was 2011. So I had sold my landscape construction and management company in 2010. So a year later, I'm hanging out with Dad, and Dad is hosting the first ever conference. So this is a big deal. And we go out to a nice dinner, come out and have some drinks. And then Craig's like, well, let's just bar hop down that boulevard down in Fort Lauderdale. Dad goes home, but Craig stays out and all of his associates and buddies. And I had a super hard time waking up in the morning. And we were laughing before the show, though, because when I eventually came down there, and I think we actually told this story early on in one of the shows with Dad had told me to go back upstairs and basically get it together. And I was always shocked. It's not that I was saying to Craig before we went live, is that it wasn't that I hadn't had a lot of beverages and had to show up to do something, but I only had to show up to like ride a mower or dig a hole for a tree back in the landscape days, and now I was showing up in a suit and tie. Craig was already down there super cheery, and I was just shocked at how these 60 high-class, highly intelligent professionals could go out till 2 a.m. and then host a huge conference and be operable. I was like, man, I might be able to plant a tree, but I don't know how you guys do it. But welcome, Craig, and thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Craig is probably one of the first Australian SEPAs, between maybe two overall. He is the founder of Succession Plus, which I believe is the largest business succession and exit planning firm in Australia.
Yep.
You started that firm maybe 15 years ago?
2009, yeah.
2009. And more recently, you might have seen Craig at a summit or on a webinar promoting another company called Capitalize, which he's also the founder in. But he's also an author of 2 great books that I have in front of me. We'll dive into those. He wrote his thesis for his PhD in exit planning, which I think is wildly unique. We're going to dive into that. And you've been a SEPA now for 12 years.
Yeah, 12 years.
12 years. So value acceleration methodology. So you came through in 2011.
Yeah.
And the methodology didn't come out till 13. So a lot to talk about. So I'm glad that we have some time together. So let's go all the way back to the roots, because I think it's interesting on multiple perspectives, right? So 2011, when you become a SEPA, the profession of exit planning here in the United States is certainly new, and I would assume it's certainly new over there.
Yeah.
But let's go beyond that, because you have more experience than just obviously starting at SEPA. You have probably 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So take us back to where you're kind of come from a little bit, and how you got into this exit planning space.
Yeah, so I was a CPA, an accountant with a public practice in Australia. I had a stack of business clients.
Yep.
And as I started to work with those clients, by the way, I hated accounting. I found it really boring. It's important.
Even
it's got to be done.
It's boring or what?
It's boring, mate.
Okay.
It's really boring. But it's important, right? It's got to be done. But what I had was all these clients, approaching baby boomers, thinking about retirement. And they came to me as their accountant and said, well, how do we do this? And what's my business worth? And how do I sell it? And I sort of went, well, I'm not sure, but we better work that out. So I basically worked it out as I went. I had a couple of really good clients that I worked through an exit process with. I valued their business up front, sat down with them, talked about what they wanted to do. And then I started to look for a methodology. I thought, I need some help here. I need to know what to do here. I've never done this before. I'm 30 years old then, not 55 like I am now.
Okay.
So, I'm talking to clients about selling their business, and there was no methodology. So I'm getting online. I'm looking at different things. I'm trying to read books. I'm trying to find anything I can. Came across this course in Chicago.
Yeah, that's wild.
SEPA course, ended up coming over. But the experience of working with clients, what I learned was two things. One, I sold a business that we valued originally at $8 million. And 4.5 years later, we sold it for 22. And not only did we sell it for 22, but the owner, who was already reasonably wealthy, he'd had a really good business, he'd done a great job, he was a smart guy. He sold the business for 22 and he literally donated $5 million to charity the next week. And he sent me a thank you card with a copy of the receipt from the donation.
Wow.
And as soon as I got that and opened that, I immediately went, I need to do a lot more of this and a lot less of that accounting stuff.
Yeah, it's like super fulfilling.
For me. This was so rewarding. And it was, the card, I can't remember, it said something like, thanks so much for your help, life-changing for me, life-changing for my family, and hopefully life-changing for this
others.
charity.
Yeah.
And I just went, whoa, this is big. This is cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. It's just a couple of shows ago, we had Joe Strazzeri on, who's a fellow Exit Planner of the Year. And I asked him what attracts him to business owners, and it sounds maybe it's like a similar answer for you, is that I think he says something that I think a lot of people don't understand, that entrepreneurs and business owners are almost servant leaders, right? They're serving, they're leading by serving others, just like that guy who donated $5 million. So similar, what kind of attracts you into that business owner crowd now?
And I think they also need help.
Absolutely, even though they might not admit it.
They're smart and they're risk takers and they work really hard and they do all that stuff. But, they might be they're running an air conditioning business because they're a good air conditioning mechanic. Not because they're a great business person.
That's true,
they're
though,
great
man.
with air conditioning.
It is true.
20 years later, they've got 30 staff and 15 trucks on the road and stuff everywhere. And that's a different business to fixing air conditioners. That's now you've got to be a business person. And so they need help with that.
You do. You need, I experience it today, and I experience it back in my landscaping company, much more sophisticated today. I think that one of my biggest struggles in 2023 is the complexity of business, right? So certainly to your point, I need to surround myself with great advisors like you who have much more experience, because the complexities of the decisions I need to make it's just deeper. And then, we have a company of like 30 people. It's not like 2011 when there was like me and Dad running around.
Absolutely.
So just multiple personalities. And in a business like we're in here at EPI, super creative, super high growth. So we attract a certain type of person, which is really challenging for me too, because I don't have a PhD or anything like that, right? I went to school for horticulture. So at times you're like, wow, how do I embrace it? It's super cool because they challenge me, but also how do I keep all these people happy? But to your point, that story hits home for me because, we were just at the time trying to run SEPA programs, host a good conference, really take care of our members. There was 2, then 3, then 5, and then next thing you know, we have 650 people at a summit, 30 employees, 5,000 certified exit planning advisors, and this craft that you had, this air conditioning craft that you had, has now blown up to all these people and things.
World.
It's just it is a different world.
Yeah.
So 2011, so you start your firm, you get into this space, and then you find the SEPA program online.
Yeah,
in 2011.
I found the SEPA program. This is before you guys.
That's
were involved,
right, and yeah,
man.
Your
dad actually taught one of the sessions.
Because Dad became a SEPA in 2008, so he's been around for a few years.
So I turn up at the Chicago at the Booth School of Business,
right? And you fly all the way over.
It's a big trip.
It's just wild to think about it in 2011 because there's probably 20 people in your class?
There was about 20 people in the class. Yeah.
Okay, so you get to the United States.
And I just, it hit home the second I walked in. I basically went, okay, these people are pretty cool. And I spoke to people like Sean Hutchison. And sat down and went, okay, there's some cool people here.
Yeah.
Let's get to know people. And then over the 3 or 4 days, there's a lot of learning there, and I went, okay, now I found what I need. I found this methodology.
Okay.
I found and this is before value acceleration.
Yep.
But
right.
there was still a process and
Yeah.
lots of learning. And on the flight home, which, for those people that haven't been to Australia, it's a 14-hour flight from LA to Sydney.
Right.
So on the way home, I don't sleep well on planes. I wrote a methodology. I sat down and I wrote a original version of the book. It was called Planning Your Getaway, and it had 9 steps to exit your business.
And now you have 21, right?
Now I've got 21. But back
but
then,
it started from the plane trip home.
It had 9. On the plane home, I thought I'm going to write all this down. I'd learn all this stuff, had all these notes, and I wrote down basically 9 steps and a page on each, what the step meant and how you could do it and what needed to be done.
That's so interesting because it's like for the SEPAs that are listening to the show, it would actually be kind of nice post-SEPA program to have 13 undisturbed hours to just create. So it's actually kind of a cool experience. Yeah,
it was excellent.
And if you don't sleep well, it's kind of a cool thing to do.
Well, so I just wrote it down and sort of got a really clear definition. What does it look like?
So you get back home then to Australia, and what's the market like back then? So here, 2011, we would have been still in that $10 trillion opportunity era, right? Because Dad's book didn't come till 2016.
Yeah, correct.
So you would have read the $10 trillion opportunity by Pete and Rich.
Yep.
So what kind of opportunities back home for you?
Interestingly, 2011, the first baby boomer turned 65 in 2011.
Okay.
That's actually the year that it happened.
Okay.
So in Australia, we got the same generational demographics as you've got here, except there's a lot less of us by a factor of 10, right? So it's much smaller. But we've got the baby boomers. We've still got business owners looking to retire. And there still was really no methodology and no process. So they were going to their accountant, their financial advisor, their lawyer, asking questions. How do I do this? What do I need to do? And they just had no idea. So I started with a few clients that I already knew with this 9-step process.
So you've left the accounting firm that you were at?
Yeah, I left that back in 2008.
Okay.
And that was partly, there was a succession plan there that went really badly wrong.
Okay.
So that was the other reason that I was motivated to get this right, because I knew what it looked like when it went wrong.
Yeah.
And it cost a lot of money and it was painful for lots of people. And I just went, I don't want that to happen to anybody. Let's work out how we do it properly.
Yeah.
And so the SEPA course, the methodology, the 9-step process that we had back then. And then I just started working with business owners. I'm a pretty, I'm happy to take risks and I'll have a go.
Yeah, that is very much you.
I'll have a crack. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it did work. The first 4 or 5 clients I started to work with. And it's something that, your dad writes about in the latest book, it's just good business sense, whether it's exit planning or value acceleration. It's just smart business, right?
Yeah.
So I started working with these business owners and they all loved it. They're all happy to pay me money. They all followed the journey. They all listened to what I said. They all started doing it and started working. And I'm going, okay, we've got something here.
Yeah.
This is actually, we're on the right track. So then 9 steps became 15 and then 15 became 21.
As you evolved with your clients.
Yeah, as we learned more from each client, what worked, what didn't work. We found gaps. Things that we hadn't covered, we really need to look at that.
Yep.
Then I had a client where, we'd started the process and he got diagnosed with cancer about 4 months in. And so we stopped and went, okay, this is where the 5 stages of value sort of theory came in. The second stage, protect value. We didn't do that back then. So this poor guy ends up with cancer and I'm going, well, we're getting this. We didn't have it covered.
Right.
So then we stopped and said, okay, we need another 3 steps in there. We've got to fix that piece. If something happens to somebody on the way through the journey, there's got to be a solution for that as well. So the product and the methodology evolved, but over time it just started to work and we started to prove the method. And then I started to get advisors coming to me, people like accountants and lawyers saying, how do you do that? We want to join you. We thought
because you got to
it.
be the only. So unlike even in 2011, there was probably when we bought EPI in October of 2012, so it would have been a year after probably you became a SEPA. There was 120 SEPAs.
Yeah.
But going back home to Sydney, Australia, you're like 2.
Yeah, there's 2 in Australia.
And so
Peter Hickey, the guy from
and Peter Hickey.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting. I don't know if Peter Hickey at the time was advising clients, right, versus building a software, right, building a software business. But you could have been one of the only, if not the only person really talking about it. It just has to be such a unique opportunity.
Yeah, it was. So I became the thought leader in Australia and, I write and publish a lot of content. We were talking about that before. Yeah. So it started to be a bit of a, push-pull strategy. We had clients sort of saying we need help. And I had advisors saying, well, I've got clients that need help, but I don't know how to do it. I said, well, come and join me and I'll show you how to do it. You can use the methodology I've written and the tools I've created and the process. And that sort of just started to work from there.
So were you also, like how we teach here in the United States, it's all about the exit planning team. Were you also bringing in different advisors along the way back then as well?
Yeah, and I was very successful growing very quickly the accounting firm because I had this collaborative approach. I used to have joint meetings with the financial advisor, the lawyer.
So that became, it's very natural for you. Yeah, sure.
Because I think business owners need that. And even more so they need it in exit planning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that's super interesting. So now you're becoming the thought leader. You kind of alluded to now, even advisors are calling you. Talk about how then you scaled, right? Because there's got to be a big J curve for you because it's almost like the EPI journey, right? It's like,
yeah, it is.
In 2017, we would have really started to penetrate the financial services arena here at EPI. And that's when we got the eye of UBS, Merrill Lynch, Raymond James, Edward Jones, and that momentum started building. So now you flash even 5 years to 2015. You have likely the largest exit planning.
Then I had easily the largest exit planning business in Australia, probably the only exit planning business. There are a few people talking about succession and helping businesses prepare for sale, which is sort of exit planning or what they called it. But, they were one-man bands and there were people here. Ended up with, sort of 20 advisors that approached me. So, Chris came out to Australia in 2015.
Yep.
We ran the SEPA program in my office in Sydney.
Gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And I think we had about 18 people attend the SEPA program in Sydney, and 15 of those people worked for me.
So I actually totally forgot about that. I mean, he came out in 2015, and you guys ran the one and only,
the only one,
right? That we had ever really put together formally there. Wow,
and it was a big job because we had to convert all the materials from American tax and ESOPs to Australian,
and then just generally the language. Like I was reading your book,
spelling,
I was reading. I always find it when I'm reading like this original book too, or even like your profile on LinkedIn, you're like when you say realize, it's with an S, not a Z, right? You had to change all of that
English
too.
In Australia.
Right. So I do. I remember that because we would have been 3 years into our ownership of VPI.
Yeah.
The book the Walking to Destiny book wouldn't have come out yet, but the methodology
was
about
there.
2 years into the program as well. So tell me more about the Australian business owners and maybe this transitioning market. So if you said in 2011 the oldest baby boomer was 65, now they're well into their mid to late 70s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for us, we're seeing a big change in the market. This really the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, swayed this a lot.
Yeah,
we used to. I opened up with the $10 trillion opportunity. We used to say, not say that the market was 60% owned by baby boomer business owners, and that was about $10 trillion of wealth. Today, that's come down to 51% in the United States, and the chunk that's kind of risen up, 43%, is now owned by that Generation X. So people between, say, let's call it 40 years old and maybe up to 55 years old.
Yep.
And I think that's having a sway on the market. We just completed the State of Owner Readiness Survey in the state of Minnesota. And I don't know if we've talked about this as you've been here for a day or two chatting, but what's the coolest part, and as a longtime SEPA and advisor to me and Dad, you probably appreciate this. We did an original survey there in 2017, and it's all the poor statistics and data that we always see in the space, right? Owners clearly aren't ready, and they clearly aren't knowledgeable about what exit planning really can do for them, right? Like you talked about earlier, as a business strategy, as a life strategy, as an entrepreneur. Interviewing them or surveying them again now in 2023, we find that it has swayed to way more readiness and way more knowledge.
Yep.
And it's super cool. So I have like multiple theories on this, but one is generational. I think people in their 40s and early 50s, just at least the generational characteristic of that generation, at least here in the United States, would tell us that they are actually very financially literate. If you ask them about financial planning, they say that they are, I think in an Investopedia study, 83% of them said that they felt very confident in their financial planning. They're also a little pessimistic of the future because, again, here in the States, they're not really betting on any Social Security and stuff. They'd rather take their own financial future in their own hands, but they're also conservative and believe in saving. But the big thing that strikes me is that Generation X believes in a work-life balance, values their time, and rather works smarter, not harder. All of those things scream exit planning to me.
Correct.
And then on top of that, if you looked at the state of Minnesota in 2017 with the first survey, we had 9 SEPAs in the state. Now we have over 100. Yep. And we had 200 people on a mailing list. Now we have over 1,000. And there's literally dozens of exit planning related events going on, and a lot of them partnered with our chapter there. So it's cool as a longtime, more veteran SEPA to see all this hard work that we've done, at least in one state. And then see how that awareness has changed. So between the awareness that we've had and the generations that we've had, I think more people within the states now, in all generations, are embracing exit planning. Do you feel like that has changed since you started back in 2011 with your SEPA?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's much more awareness now. I think people are much more, they're much more savvy about research and getting online and reading and finding out what they need to know. There's a lot more material out there. If you looked at books on exit planning in 2009 when
a handful,
you wouldn't find a few. There'd been 5. Now
that's why I always think it's funny that you found us in 2011, right?
Yeah. And now there's hundreds. So, people are writing books. There's lots of material. There's lots of videos, lots of podcasts. People can get more educated more easily. So I think that helps.
Yeah, I do think it helps. That's a good point that I also haven't thought about. Maybe I'll incorporate that in the report, that generally the awareness is just, again, really across and big markets. So it's just Australia, Canada, United States, England. We're all talking about it because we all have similar issues, if you will. What about family business? What's like the state of family business in Australia?
Yeah, look, it's very similar to what it is here. The research that I've done, it's a very similar market, similar age demographics, similar style. It's obviously a much smaller market. There's only 10% of your population in Australia, right?
Yeah.
So it's much smaller, but it looks the same. There's a lot of family-owned businesses. A lot of those are still owned by baby boomers. A lot of them have been disappointed by the fact they couldn't pass it on to their kids because maybe the kids didn't want to do that, or they want to go and do something else, study art, or go to London and practice law, or whatever it might be. So they haven't taken over the business. And unfortunately, most of those business owners that are family, that was their exit strategy. They didn't think about anything else because the kids will take over because that's what they did. Right. Or that's just what they expected to happen. Yeah. Particularly, we've got a lot of immigrants from both Southeast Asia and Europe post-World War II, as you have here. That family business tradition is many, many hundreds of years old. And so
that's what I find fascinating.
It's not passing on to your kids anymore. That's a big difference.
Well, when we were doing some work with the Cox Family Business Center in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Atlanta, Georgia area, Kennesaw State University, I think it was. And what I found interesting there, when they did a study on European family-owned businesses, they were going into the 6th or 7th generation. And I think that's interesting. A lot of the times they wanted the business, but a lot of times they felt that it was their obligation to take on this family legacy and business too.
Absolutely.
So I think that has a lot of influence. I don't see that as much here, obviously, in the United States.
Yeah,
do you see
and
that?
We don't have it as much either, no. Because we haven't got that history. In the UK, where we've got Succession Plus got an office in the UK, there are businesses over there that have been around for 600 and 700 years.
I know, isn't that? It's wild. We don't. That's like,
so you imagine the pressure if you're that son or daughter expected to take over that business. It's been in your family for 600 years. You can't say no.
That's what in the European studies they were like, this is what you're doing. Like and they've likely been working in the business since they've been a kid, anyways, and it just gets passed down through the family. It's like such a blessing and a burden at the same time. Yeah. It'd be interesting to kind of study like the intergenerational forced transition to see if the kids really actually enjoy that business, or is it literally just a legacy? It's an obligation and a legacy. So I want to take a quick break, but after we come back, I want to talk about your thesis in exit planning. I don't know anybody that has done that. Or maybe there's some other folks inside of the EPI community, but the data, the study, and all of that, I want to talk to you about what you found out. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
For business owners, by a business owner. Walking to Destiny is your essential resource for understanding what makes your business highly profitable and significant. It becomes a business owner's handbook to know how to rapidly grow value and ultimately unlock the personal wealth trapped in business. Exit Planning Institute CEO Christopher Snider demonstrates how strategic exit planning will help you achieve improvements today while positioning you to build wealth for generations. Secure your success along other value creators. Discover, prepare, and decide what your walk to destiny will ultimately be. If executed correctly, these strategies can grow a business owner's wealth by 10 times. Walking to Destiny, the second edition, the 11 actions an owner must take to rapidly grow value and unlock wealth. Get your copy today at www.walkingtodestiny.com.
Welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast, hanging out with my friend Craig West, actually Dr. Craig West nowadays. And so that's what I wanted to get to after the break here, was talking about the thesis that you wrote to earn that PhD, and you did it in exit planning. So can you just talk through that? How long did it take for you to do that?
It took me 7 years. So I started in 2015 and finished in 2022.
And were you doing research for your thesis kind of all the way through? I mean, it is kind of interesting because you're also working with business owners along the way, right?
And so I had this really interesting balance of, a lot of experience, literally 30 years as an accountant and then an advisor, an exit planner and so on. So I had a lot of experience. Yeah. But that's quite different. It's quite important, but it's quite different to academic research. It's quite different to having the data and the scientific, knowledge behind actually what drives decision making. So I started out with a very, accounting, tax, theoretical model around why people chose different exit options, but ended up being almost entirely around the psychology and the drivers of decision making towards an exit choice.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. So, I surveyed a stack of business owners, interpreted the data. It was quite, it's quite complicated mathematically to interpret data and make some conclusions about what that data meant. Yeah. But what I found was sort of two key things, really. Most baby boomers, and this is Australian data, we didn't survey anyone outside Australia, but I have no reason to believe it'd be any different here. Okay. It'd be interesting to see what everyone thinks. But, so the data came back, and basically what it said was most baby boomer business owners in Australia were already quite wealthy. Okay. They'd owned their business for 10, 20, some of them 30 years. They bought a house 40 years ago in Australia. They made some investments. They were now reasonably wealthy. So back when I was an accountant 20 years ago, people used to come to me, I need to sell my business for $5 million so I can afford to retire. They don't say that now because they've already got their $5 million. They've got their house. They've got an investment property. They've got some shares or stocks. They've got, they're well off financially.
Does that include the value of their business, or are they saying I'm wealthy independently?
I'm already wealthy, Without the business.
Without the business, I'm independently wealthy.
And so that changes your psyche. So straight away,
I don't know if that would match. I don't know if that would match.
It's interesting to see.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We'll go on.
So what happens then was a lot of these baby boomers then changed the reason they were exiting from I need $5 million to retire to I'd like to have the $5 million. No one's going to say no if you give them $5 million, right? They'll still have it. But their main driver was then more about legacy. So they started to say things like, I want to look after my employees. I've got people that have worked for me for 20 years. I've got customers and suppliers that have helped me build this business over 20 years. When I was in trouble in the GFC, they extended me extra credit. I want to look after that guy because he's still here. So those reasons for exiting changed, which then meant the decisions they make about exit planning and preparation were different because they were different outcomes. Yeah. And that's why, when we go right back to the methodology that we use, you've got to understand what people are trying to do. If I'm preparing a business for sale to get maximum dollars and actually the owner doesn't care about that, what they care about is looking after their employees, I'm probably going to get the answer wrong. And so I have to understand
That's true, having that conversation early
so
and often.
Understanding what goals are you looking for? Like, what are you trying to actually achieve here? What does success look like to you as the business owner in this whole exit conversation? And sometimes it's about money for sure, but sometimes it's not. And if it's not, then you have to make sure you address that.
Yeah. So I might have all kinds of questions, but so what do you think then about, so that's kind of like a roadmap to an option. So if you sit down and said, okay, it's about closing the wealth gap, so more about money, or, okay, I'm independently wealthy, it's more about taking care of my employees. How do you feel then about, or maybe in your research, did you find hybrid options? So it's a thing that I think we talk a lot about today in Exit Planning Institute. It's a thing that kind of fascinates me, given that I'm in a family business. So as Dad wants to take some chips off the table, how am I funding that?
How you can do that.
Is he going to fund it? Do I need to bring in a private equity group? Can the employee, what does that look like? But I believe folks like me in their 40s could have multiple bites of the apple along the way, where I think baby boomers look at it as more one bite of the apple. Absolutely. Because they start thinking about exit planning almost too late.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, or does that have any change of decision making if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have multiple bites of the apple along the way?
Yeah. So what the research found was two things. There's a fairly substantial increase in those hybrid exit strategies, those exit strategies that are a combination of both financial and legacy.
Okay.
So, the family business opportunity where you get some funding in and you sort of step your way through it. The other thing I found was this whole, there's a whole stack of research. And the good thing about doing the thesis, if there is a good thing, because it's bloody hard work, let me tell you.
I would assume so.
But the good thing was, the first thing you have to do is what's called a literature review.
Okay.
And you have to review, which means read and summarize in detail everything that's been written about exit planning. So I read there's nearly 400 references in my thesis on other papers by other researchers on exit planning. So what that meant was,
Australian research, or are you just saying you could go worldwide and say, look,
you have to go
here,
worldwide.
Okay. So because you gather different insights,
and you have
opinions.
to look at all different opinions and different research and compare them and contrast them and why is that right and why is that wrong, and some of the research, we talked briefly about it last night. This whole idea of role identity fusion became a big deal.
Right.
So what we found was the hybrid exit strategies where they take a longer time because there's multiple steps through the process. They're more attractive to baby boomers. Why? Because they don't want to leave their business.
They don't want to leave. Right.
So if I don't want to leave and you get me to sign a piece of paper that says, get my business ready and sell it, that's very threatening. If you sign a bit of paper that says, set up an employee share plan for me, I want to give my employees equity over the next 10 years, and then I want to sell a bit of equity to a private equity firm to take some money out, that's not threatening. It's 10 years away. It's not It's not going to scare me.
Yeah, right.
So let's do the hybrid one because it's slow and it's gradual and I can gradually exit.
And you're still diversifying your financial portfolio and all of that. And to your point, if you found that baby boomer owners didn't necessarily need the value from their business, then that would also be advantageous because I still have a role. I have an identity as a business owner in my business. Instead of owning 100%, I own 75 or 51%. That's super interesting.
And then the last piece that was really interesting to me was the influence on the decision. So who or how did they influence decision-making for the owner to exit? Was it family members? Not really.
Okay.
Interestingly, not really.
Yeah.
Was it other advisors? Yes, but only very specific advisors. So CPA. We put exit planner in there, and quite a few people now are saying exit planner.
Sure.
Whereas I think if I did that 10 years ago, everyone would go, who's that?
Yeah,
what does that
doesn't mean anything.
Financial advisors have a role to play, bankers in some cases, business coaches. So there's quite a multiple range of advisors and external parties. One of the biggest ones was friends that own businesses.
We see that here too. We saw it in the Minnesota State of Owner Readiness, and we do see it time and time again. I actually think it's the most looked over piece of data that comes out.
Yeah, that's a really important piece.
When you looked at the Minnesota data that we've been working on over the last couple of weeks, they're stayed strong. So the third most trusted advisor, even though the second stayed the same, so it's the attorney.
Yep.
The big switch that we found at the top, the number one most trusted advisor in 2017 was the CPA.
Yep.
And now the CPA has dropped to like sixth place.
Yep.
And rising all the way up from like 10th place has been the financial advisor, which is now their number one, at least in the state of Minnesota, and the owners that we surveyed, saying that their financial advisor is. Yeah, but what stayed strong at third place in both surveys and what we see in the national are owner peer groups.
Yep.
Other people that own businesses.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's bad or good, but I would say
it's a problem because they're not qualified.
Well, they're not qualified. And I would say too, it's probably, I always joke, right? Because I would say when I get asked that question by advisors, well, Scott, who as an owner and an owner of the Exit Planning Institute, who's your most trusted advisor? I go probably three groups before and there's maybe a little bit of a bleed between, but I would say fellow business owners. I'm always calling up different owners and saying, hey, what do you think about that? But to your point, I understand that they're probably don't understand the readiness stuff that I know.
Yeah.
And then I would say number two, my leadership team.
Yep.
So folks like Paige and Jesse and Josh Koza and Jocelyn and Chase, I turn to them and say, what do you think about this? Again, maybe a little different because we're Exit Planning Institute, so our leadership teams understands value and income, the both mindsets.
Yeah.
And then I would say like a board of people like you. So you're an advisor as well. So there's kind of the bleed between that. But that, I think that owners are very influenced by fellow owners. So how did that then influence their decision making?
Well, the problem with that is, I mean, I don't know about here. I think it's probably very similar, but certainly in Australia, we've got this DIY concept with business owners, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I actually said to a business owner the other day, he's in my office and, he's talking about with my advisor that works for me, the proposal we've given him to do the ongoing advisory, and it's $5,000 a month. And he says, a lot of this stuff I can do myself. And I said, yeah. No, you definitely can. Do you do your own root canal therapy?
Yeah, right.
And he sort of looks at me like I'm some kind of idiot. And I said, mate, seriously? You really want to do this yourself? It's your biggest asset. You got the biggest, we showed you in the report, the value gap's like $5 million, and you want to look after that yourself? Seriously?
Yeah.
And he just sort of looked at me and went, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
How's it work? And then I explained, the process, and off he went. But there is a natural instinct, I think, with owners to say, well, geez, I don't want to spend that money. Maybe I can do this myself, or I can do a shortcut, or I've got a mate that can help me. And you sort of worry about what that might look like in a larger, more complicated. These are complicated businesses, most of them.
Cool,
and so you need expert help. But I think that owner influence is really important. So what we've been able to do and what we do with the business is we get owners who have already exited or who've been a long way through the program, and we get brand new prospects or clients coming in, and we mix them together as early as possible. So the guys that have been through it and done it and been successful will talk about the process and how it worked. And I paid them a lot of money, but my God, didn't we get a good result? Or didn't we get, we got more money than we thought, or we got a better outcome than we thought.
Yeah.
So that cross-pollination of that advice actually helps.
Yeah, I always think that is one of the best. And I think it's even in like a business development tactic, teaching owners in groups is also critical because they can say, okay, here's this expert advisor, but let me take what that guy's teaching me and ping it off some other owners that own different styles of businesses, revenue ranges, and all of that. So you kind of alluded to the process. So now I want to kind of get into a couple of your books. So the most recent one is It All Begins with Insights, and I couldn't agree more. We were talking about that before we started the show, and you got me when you said the root canal thing, right? Like. Yeah. You wouldn't. We get this question a lot in the SEPA program. Once we get into the middle of the week is when we move from the discover gate of the methodology into the prepare. And as you move into prepare, I think a lot of advisors in the program take a nice liking to that because that's where I always say exit planning truly comes alive. And they say, well, what if I get an owner that doesn't want to do the discover stuff, wants to just get into prepare and start working? And we would say at EPI that they're likely not a great client for you because, in your words, it begins with insights. And for us, it begins with a discovery phase where we would do some type of assessment. So can you kind of just talk to that and why that is so important that you literally just wrote a whole book around that particular discovery phase?
One of the first things I wrote was what we call a business insights report, which is the very first thing that we do with every single client. So I've done 800 client engagements since 2009, right? Every single one of them, without one exception, has had an insights report. And the clients that said, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to pay for that, or I've already got a valuation report from my CPA, I let them walk away.
Right, it's not a great client for you.
This is not flexible.
Okay.
This is the process.
This is where we start.
We know it works. We've done it 800 times. Don't come and tell me how to do it. You came to me for help. I didn't come to you, mate.
Right,
if you want to do it this way,
we got to diagnose like a doctor. I can't just give you a diagnosis. I have to understand where we're at.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the insights report's a deep dive into the business. It looks at their finances. It looks at the structure, the valuation, the value gap. What do you need to do? And it's a bit like, Justin's book. Your baby's ugly.
Yes.
Sometimes the report's not great. Right. Sometimes business owners, I've had people in my office in tears. Yeah. When we go through that report, because they think they've got a $10 million business and I'm telling them it's worth $3 million.
I know.
And they're devastated.
Kick in the gut.
Because their life's work.
It's their life
said,
work.
I'm sorry, but it's not worth $10 million. You're going to get $3 million.
If you remember back in 2011, when you came to SEPA, we had this theme, if you will, of change the outcome, right? Change the outcome for business owners because of that, right? Their outcome is they thought that they had a $10 million business. Now they only have a $3 million and they're screwed because they don't have enough time. So now they've lost $7 million and that could be detrimental to their wealth if they do need it. we've pivoted from that over the last couple of years, primarily because of what you're actually talking about, is that I think many owners that come for you for an insights report feel they have a very successful company. Like you were saying, a lot of them baby boomers that are first generation, started from scratch, over 20 years have built this thing. And if you ask them, are you proud of what you built? They'd say, of course. We have great employees. I have great customers, a lot of deep relationships. We have a purposeful product or service. But then when they get their insights reports, they find that out, although they might have a successful year-over-year business and maybe a successful 10 or 20-year run, we say they don't have something of significance.
Yep.
And significance to us is something that's highly valuable, ready and attractive, that then's aligned to their business, personal, and financial goals.
Yep.
And so, but I totally agree where they're like shocked because they're in this moment realizing that I've spent 20 years building this thing. I make good money. I might have some nice cars, boats, like we're well off, but you're telling me that we're not. So it's got to be, it's got to be
it's
kind
quite
of
confronting.
It's very insightful.
But that's why I'm saying it's got to begin with that. And that's the triggering event. That's the conversation the advisor can have with a client in a real moment of clarity with all the data in front of them to say, here's where you're at.
Yeah.
And there's no point, if I've got to get from here to Chicago, there's no point me starting that journey unless I know where I'm at.
Exactly.
I don't know which way to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the wrong way for sure.
Exactly.
So I have to know exactly what I've got today, what it looks like, the good and the bad, and then what do I need to do to get to where I want to end up.
So in the insights or maybe post-insights, one of the other things that comes out of your methodology that a lot of CEPAs would understand is the three legs of the stool. But you call it something different. I was telling you pre-show too, as a business owner, when I reread it preparing for our show, it really hit me. And I must admit, it hit me a little bit better than the three legs of the stool.
Yep.
You call it my business, my money, and myself.
Yeah.
And so do you get insights in my money and myself too when you're
I think
in this phase?
the three legs of the stool is there because it works, right?
It does.
You can't do one without the other. You've got to have all three, right?
Yeah.
The reason I use that sort of language and the way that I talk about it with clients, with business owners, is I think there's a lot of skill and a lot of value in making things as simple as possible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vested interest in people, particularly advisors, unfortunately, that want to make things complicated. Because they think that's the way to go.
It's almost like their natural state, right?
Yeah.
And it's like almost not their fault.
It is complicated.
Yes.
If you're dealing with, heaven help me, if you're dealing with taxation in the United States, that's a complicated issue, right? I was telling people last night about our tax system in Australia. They're all going, what? Is that simple? I said, it's really simple.
Yeah.
In comparison, it's ridiculously simple. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of skill in, particularly for a business owner, giving them that really simple view, breaking things down into the basics they're not dumb. I'm not saying that. Yeah. But what they need is real clarity around what they need to do. Yeah. The other thing I think they need is real direct instruction on what to do. They're happy to follow that.
Yeah.
If you sit there and say, oh, look, there's 4 things you could do, A, B, C, D, and E, and they've all got various pros and cons, you're just going to confuse them with too many choices. So what you need to do is break things down to simple, make it clear, and give them a clear direction to go.
So let's go to the other side. So your other book, Enjoy It. When did Enjoy It come out?
First version of that came out in about 2015, I think.
So a few years after.
3 or 4 editions now.
And there's 3 or 4 editions. This is where that, if you guys are interested watching the show, let's see, in this version of it, I just actually flipped to it, but that's where you could see the graphic of my money, my business, and myself, which I think Craig showcases it in like diamond form and showcases how that each bleeds together versus the 3 legs of the stool, where the legs of the stool are separate.
Yep.
And what combines them is the seat of the stool. But a very interesting graphic to talk about that and enjoy it. One of the things I think is actually interesting is your very last chapter, which is what if it's too late?
Yep.
And it's another question that we get a lot in our community and certainly inside of the CEPA program while new candidates are coming through. They're saying, okay, I get it if I have a lot of time and the guy's 60 and I got another 5-year run. But what if the guy's 72 or 74 and he's triggered by something and we have 6 months or 12 months? So is it too late? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the answer is it's never too late to do something.
Right.
Can you do, in our process, 21 steps in 6 months? No. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. So what we then do is we still do the insights report.
I was going to say, you start with the
insights.
Still
do the insights report. Okay. That's not flexible. Then what we do is say, well, you haven't got time to do 21 steps. Let's work out the 5 or 6 things that are going to make the biggest difference. So our report will tell you these are the key value drivers. If it's about going from 5 million to 7 million before you sell, these 5 things are going to make the biggest difference. So let's just work on them.
Yeah.
We can't get through 21 in that time period.
Right.
What you don't want to do is end up with the, put lipstick on a pig and hope somebody buys it, because that doesn't work very well either. And it generally ends up in a bit of a mess. So what you do want to do is just let's get the 5 or 6 key things that are going to make the biggest impact, and we'll just work on them. And hopefully you can get that done in time, and you can still get some value acceleration happening.
Yeah.
Not in an ideal world because your time frame's too short. And that's why the message and the awareness and the education is so important. You can't start too early, but you can start too late.
Yes.
So the earlier you start, the better. Begin with the end in mind. Start as early as you can.
Yeah.
I've never had anyone say, "Oh, why do we start this so early, Craig? What are you doing?"
Yeah, right.
Never.
So a couple things that come out of that. Maybe a short answer is: are you also representing people that then go to market for sale or internally for a family transition? Or are you bringing in other? You're bringing in other advisors.
We always bring in other advisors, depending on what they want to do.
And then what about these younger owners? So what do you think one of your in terms of age? What's one of your younger clients? How old are they?
I've got clients in their early 30s.
Okay.
So that's been a change as well. Like, they used to all be baby boomers. Now there's a lot of young people. And your dad spoke about this at the last summit. There's a change in that demographic.
There is.
Because they're not going to keep the business till they're baby boomers.
No.
They might keep it for 5 years. They'll go through the value acceleration. They'll build it up, and then they'll sell it.
And
they'll
they
go and do
boomerang
something
back.
else.
Yeah,
they'll go and do another business, or they'll go and do another venture. And that's a good thing, because they're focused on what we want them to be focused on. They understand value.
Yes.
Their goal is, I've bought this business for 2 million. I want to sell it for 6 million in 5 years' time, and then I want to go and buy that one.
Yeah.
You go, okay, that's cool.
Still a great client for you too.
Fantastic.
Because
client.
they would continue with, okay, Craig's helped me done that business.
Fantastic
I want to bring him to here. And then probably also a good setup for the buyer, because they said, look, Craig has taken this from 2 to 6, from 6 to 10. You should keep this guy around when you buy it, because he can help you get to the next 5 or 10 million as well. But I like to see that, right? Obviously, being a younger guy myself, I just think that our generations are a little bit more inclined to be focused on that value acceleration, not only because we probably want to exit multiple times along the way, but it allows that blended balance of life as well, taking the proceeds from that and doing something else, doing something different. Well, I got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the capitalized expansion into the United States. So outside of the business succession and exit planning firm, into the software world, which I think is an interesting a business model as well. So we'll come back. We'll talk about that. Just give us a quick couple of minutes, and we'll be right back.
The Exit Planning Institute is the authority in exit planning. With its award-winning process, the Value Acceleration methodology provides deep insights into how to help business owners create more significant companies while blending and aligning their business, personal, and financial goals. EPI brings together the world's most elite exit planning advisors to form the EPI community. The EPI community represents over 15,000 professional advisors worldwide, including its 5,000 certified exit planning advisors. These advisors include financial advisors, growth consultants, CPAs, attorneys, M&A advisors, amongst others, who come together to expand their knowledge, create and innovate, network and relationship build, grow their practices, and better attract and engage business owner clients. Join EPI today and gain access to the community, content, courses, credential, and conference that you as the professional advisor need in order to harness the opportunity with small to lower middle market business owners who strive to grow a company of significance, thus having a highly valuable and transferable company. Follow the Exit Planning Institute on LinkedIn and visit earnsepa.com to learn more about the community leading the exit planning profession.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So, Craig, true entrepreneur. So you started Succession Plus 15 plus years ago, and then this 2 or 3 years ago started another company called Capitalized.
Yeah.
And for our certified exit planning advisors listening in, you probably have seen Capitalized make a big push into the exit planning space, certainly in Australia, but right here in the United States. So can you talk about why that was important to do in I think 2021, and then why was it important to expand that software company into the United States and do it really like during or pre-pandemic, kind of a gutsy move there.
Yeah,
it's kind of the risk taker that you are. We'll have a go at it.
But look, I think, we started Capitalize. I've always had a goal from 2011 on to help as many business owners as possible exit successfully. That's like my number one mantra.
That's your focus.
And I say that to all my staff. If you ask my advisors, why is Craig doing this? Hopefully, they will all tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
He wants to help as many business owners as possible exit.
Yeah.
So when I look at the market and what's going on, and I looked at various software applications. I looked at all of them when I started my own business, and the Business Insights report in the very early days was a Word document, a template.
Yeah.
We'd work in Excel and other software platforms. We'd cut and paste stuff into the Word document. It was a nightmare. It used to take us days to produce this bloody report. And so firstly, we were a bit, selfish, going, okay, we've got to find a better way to produce this report. This has taken far too long. So we started looking at the software. I went and saw our marketing agency, who the guy that runs that has known our business now for 7 or 8 years. He's a really young guy, but very, very smart, switched on. And I went and said to him, look, I need a brand. I want to create this software platform. And he said, what's it going to do? And I said, well, I want to help other exit planners all around the world do what I do, use the methodology, use the 5 stages of value, and deliver successful outcomes, because I want to help as many people as possible. He said, oh, wow, okay. So he looked at that and said, why don't you let me build the software? And I said, no, you're a marketing guy. What are you talking about? And he said, no, I'm a web developer. I've built superannuation, which is your 401k. He's built software for a bookmaker. He's built software, all financial sort of software. I went, okay. So we sat down and designed what I thought Capitalize should look like. And my view was, again, make it simple. Make it so an advisor didn't need to be a genius CPA. They didn't need to be able to do financial mathematics, but they could get a consistent report and deliver what they wanted to do for clients. So we built the software in 2020. I went to my existing shareholders and 2 clients and said, I need $500,000. Here's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to build software. It's going to do this insights report, and it's going to take 2 hours, not 2 days. And they all went, well, okay.
Interesting.
We did it. So we went away. It took about 6 months. It came in on budget and on time, which is pretty unusual for software.
Pretty unusual, I would say.
And it worked beautifully. Okay. And the report looked fantastic, and we started using it only internally. We didn't sell it to anybody. Just Succession Plus used it just in Australia. And we started delivering it to clients, and clients loved it.
Okay.
Clients looked at it
still
and
in a
went,
testing phase.
This is cool. What's this report? The graphics look fantastic. Yeah. We highlighted the key things they needed to learn out of the report in light blue squares that they just
really
learned.
popped.
Look for the light blue square.
Yeah.
What page am I on? Okay, look for the light blue square. 3. Okay, that's the number I need to worry about. So just use that process. And it started to work really well. We then looked at 2 things. We looked at international expansion and how translatable was that report into other markets. Right. So the first thing we did, I've got a business in New Zealand, Succession Plus, and a Succession Plus business in the UK. So the first thing we did was let's see if it works in those markets.
Yeah, other
which,
English
to be
speaking,
fair, they're very, very similar to Australia.
That's fair.
Right? They speak English, they spell properly, they do all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we just transferred it, and it worked straight away. We went, okay, that means it's transferable. Now, what about the big one?
Yeah.
What about the United States? Yeah. So if I'm looking at it from Australia, as you said, it's like a 20-hour plane ride to get to Cleveland. Yeah. That's not easy to run a business from Australia in Cleveland as a consultant. Yeah. If you want to run Succession Plus in Australia, that's hard work. I've got to come over here and I've got to be here a lot. And all my people do. And that's sort of not what I wanted to do. But this software, I thought, was the answer to scaling almost unlimited advisors. Theoretically, 1,000 people could use that software. There's no way I'm going to employ 1,000 advisors, but 1,000 people could use the software.
Right.
So we brought it over here. We spoke to a few advisors that I knew and just got people to start using it. Yeah. And it worked straight away. Yeah. And then we came
transferable again.
Yeah, we came to the summit sort of 15 months ago.
Yep.
We showed it. People signed up. People loved it. And away we go. And now we've got about 70 advisors over here using it. It's growing really quickly. We're improving it all the time. We get lots of good suggestions.
You're probably getting a lot of, talk about insights, you're probably getting a lot of feedback.
A lot of feedback.
So that you could.
Yeah, we have a monthly users forum with me, not with one of my staff, with me and with the CEO, Nick, and we sit there and listen to what people are saying. Luckily for us, they're not saying anything bad. What they're saying is, can you add this? Can you get it to do
evolve that?
Yeah, can you add this feature?
And you guys are pretty flexible in that.
Yeah, because we run it ourselves. It's my business. We can get the programmers to do whatever we want within reason.
That's nice.
Time and money, but theoretically, if somebody wants a new feature and 15 people on the call say, "Yeah, I'd use that," we go, "Okay, let's build it.
Yeah,
Why not? Let's build it." If that's what people want to do. So we're doing that, and it's working really well. The uptake's really good. It's really starting to accelerate now. And the good thing is, particularly with EPI and CEPAs that have been trained, the methodology is the same methodology in the software. So they walk out of a CEPA course and go, this software is built based on what I just learned.
I think one of your like taglines on the Capital website that I really turned to was built by exit planners for exit planners, right? And then to your point, if you're inside of the SEPA community, it's very relatable because you guys are using similar language, if not the same language.
The same language, yeah, absolutely.
So you're like, that I think it's a very, to your point, a very translatable, talk about transferable. You come out of the SEPA program, you're learning about it. So yeah, I think
you can walk in and start.
It's been impactful and in a very short time.
Yeah. And we're getting serious now. We're starting to ramp up. We've got an office in Denver.
Yeah.
We've got 3 staff there now. We're looking for another 2. So we're growing pretty quickly and we'll ramp things up. Yeah. And we're using the methodology to do it. Because we know it works.
Exactly. Right. So that's the good segue. So I guess in closing, I think that if you're sitting in the audience, you hear about Craig and being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. So I think that they would love to know, and I certainly would, as somebody that you said 55 years old, owns a couple of pretty successful businesses. How are you using the enjoy it stuff, the insight stuff, the value acceleration methodology stuff in your own business? Talk about the future, and as an owner, how are you embracing it?
I can give you a couple of real examples. I mean, just 10 days ago in Sydney, we had all our advisors in Australia fly into Sydney.
Yeah.
I presented a business insights report on our own business to my advisors.
Wow, pretty
live
open,
in the room.
Yeah,
using the software, the whole report. I gave them all. There's 55 pages. I gave them all 55 pages. One of them actually said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Because that's what we teach our clients to do. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah,
it's no
absolutely.
good, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah,
you got to do what we say." So we ran that through and we said to the advisors, I kept saying to them, "Put your advisor hat on. What would you tell Succession Plus to do if that was their business insights report?" You got the report; it's in front of you. You guys know how to read it. You do this all day.
It's great training exercise too, I guess,
brilliant.
too, right?
It was great.
It was brilliant, yeah.
So firstly, the advisors all get engaged because we've been open about all the information, all the financials, everything's in there. Secondly, they start going, what about this? What about this? I've got an idea. We should do this. We walk away from the conference with all these ideas, all these new energy. People are motivated now to go, right, let's work. So first thing is we use our own tools inside the business.
Absolutely.
There's tools all through that 21 steps. There's tools, we use all of them in the business. The second thing is I've got a board of directors. Okay. So I'm the chairman, but I've got 3 other independent directors that are on my board, and they're seriously qualified, experienced people. One's an executive director from a large bank in Australia. Okay. One guy's built and sold a software business. He actually listed it on the ASX. Yep. So they're smart people. Yeah. They're on a board. I report to them. Even though I'm a majority owner of my own company, I report to that board. On our board agenda at every single meeting, exit strategy. Right. It's on the board agenda, every meeting.
So you're actively talking about
it. Talk about where are we up to? Yep. What are we doing? Yep. How far along the path are we? And they keep asking me, and I've taught them what to ask. But what I teach them is I might come to the board and say, look, I've got a proposal. We're going to spend $100,000 and do X. And they often say, is that going to get you closer to your exit or further away from? Because it sounds to me like it's further away. They don't always agree with me, which is good. Yeah, of course. That's not a good thing to have people agree with me.
Yeah, right.
But it's good to be questioned and to be challenged to say, well, hang on, is that getting you closer to your exit strategy? So the first thing is it's on the board agenda, and it's a topic that we talk about every single month when we have a meeting. It's on there. Now, some meetings, that might be a 5-minute conversation. Yep, we're doing X, Y, and Z. We're on track.
Pretty straightforward.
We've also got, one of our tools is a strategic financial model that goes out 5 years. We've got that already for Succession Plus and for Capitalize. Yeah. We know what it looks like, and we know at what point is the business worth 10 million or 20 million or 50 million or whatever the number's going to be. Yeah. Because we know how we're going to get there. Yeah. So, and that's, again, it's just following the methodology that we use.
Very deliberate, very
And you have to be like that. It's very disciplined and structured, which is probably the biggest issue with most of our clients. They're not disciplined and structured.
Yeah. No, I mean,
they're too busy to do exit strategy because they've got, and so am I, but you have to do it.
Yeah. No,
it's not optional.
Yeah. I totally agree with it. I think it's one of over the past 2 to 3 years, really post pandemic, me and Dad have really gotten really tuned into the true value acceleration methodology and implementing it in our own business. I think it's one of the reasons that you've seen Chris be able to truly become decentralized from day-to-day operations. And I think the next challenge, right, is decentralizing me from that and empowering our leaders here at EPI, which last time we were talking at dinner, 31 and a half years old is the average age.
Your leadership team are all young enough to be my kids. I think without exception,
exactly.
Right?
So how do we?
Great.
Well, it's great because I think it's also great too, because now imagine at 25 or 30 years old, you can, as an employee, you already have the mindset of value and income. So talk about a deliberate, regular conversation that we have.
Yeah.
We're always talking about. So we just did this too. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you saw one of my most recent posts was a picture of my mom and dad's lake house in their family room at the lake house, where I took our leadership team down to do a mid-year reflection, is what I call it, fancy name, right? Because we do a retreat.
Yep.
This was just like a check-in, and after 6 months, let's check back in.
Where are we up to? Yep.
And let's reflect on long-term strategy. And the biggest topic that we talked about was exit strategy. What's happening with Chris? What's happening with Scott? Some of our employees are interested in equity in the Exit Planning Institute. And to your point, we're also thinking about, okay, how do we scale to the next? So we're at 5,000 members. How do we get to 10,000?
Yep.
And what kind of capital do we need to make that kind of stuff happen? And you're in town because you're also filming an academy course. So like we have new products coming out and stuff like that. So very interesting time. But Craig, I appreciate you spending some time while you're here in Cleveland. I know you have a 2 or 3 week journey across the United States. So I appreciate you coming on the show. And for everybody else, our next show will be on September 27th. So please feel free, listen, subscribe, and certainly leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. Craig, thanks again.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks.